Hey, everybody, and welcome to week 6 of class. This week we are going to move into the presidencies of both Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. So we're kind of continuing our assessment of the first presidents of the United States. Last week, Washington and Adams. This week, Jefferson and Madison. But one of the things I will say is that there is some continuity that runs through all four of these presidencies. And that continuation would be issues with foreign affairs. If you think back to last week, under Washington's administration, with the eruption of the French Revolution, the United States was highly encouraged by the French to join and partake in that. Ultimately, we do not. We rather declare our neutrality with the Neutrality Proclamation. But those conflicts between the French and the British continue to persist as long as the French and the British are at war with one another, and as long as the United States is attempting to have commerce, that is, to trade with both the French and the British, the United States will constantly be dragged into those problems. And as we're going to find, those problems run through Washington's administration. We saw issues with the French during Adams' administration, specifically with the XYZ affair and the quasi-naval war that was going on between the United States and the French. And we're going to continue to see this kind of spill over into Jefferson's and Madison's administration, and ultimately, with James Madison, this will ultimately boil over into the War of 1812. And that's one of the topics that we're going to be looking at this week is the War of 1812, a conflict that is frequently referred to as America's Second Revolution. Indeed, it's interesting, the War of 1812, in the end, there's really no major winner of the War of 1812. It's why it's often known as the Forgotten War, because there was no major large-scale drama that resulted from it. And what I mean by that is we didn't gain any new alliances. There were no new major treaties that were adopted. I mean, there was the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the war, but there was no land distribution. There was really not a whole lot of spoils of war. And for a number of reasons, we have sort of forgotten the War of 1812. But what I think is interesting about the conflict is that you gave the United States a sense of identity. Where the American Revolution provided the United States with an actual country, one that ultimately quickly changed with the coming of the Constitution, but it gave us a country. But I think that the War of 1812 provided a kind of a soul, if you will, a spirit, a sense of who we are as a people. And that is embodied in major ways in the national anthem, or the Star-Spangled Banner, which was written during the Battle of Fort McHenry, which took place in 1814. During the War of 1812. So the War of 1812 is really something we're going to be looking at this week. We'll talk about some of the battles, but more than anything, we're interested in the causes and the consequences, because there were some significant consequences for the United States, specifically with the destruction of the Federalist Party and the Hartford Convention, but we'll talk about that. So really be looking at what are the causes and the consequences, and really why is this war a war of second war for independence? You might think about that. And so that's what we're going to be looking at during really James Madison's presidency. But before we get to that, we're going to take a look at Jefferson. And during Jefferson's administration, a number of different events transpire. We're not going to have time to cover all of them, but we are going to be looking at two. One is the purchase of the Louisiana Territory, known as the Louisiana Purchase, which was done in 1803, and $15 million, which was roughly about 3.4 cents an acre, so it was a great land deal. But one of the truisms about the Louisiana Purchase is that it really gave the United States the ability to move west, and it helps in a major way to facilitate what will eventually be called manifest destiny, this westward migration of Americans. And this westward migration for the United States is an interesting movement, because it has been historically painted in very romantic terms, in more contemporary and more detrimental terms, because in one way it really helped the United States to grow and spread its institutions, but at the same time it also meant the spread of slavery and the destruction of Native American lands, the displacement of Mexicans, and a whole range of other things. So we're going to be talking about that at a later time, but just note that this purchase really helped to facilitate that. And then the other thing that we're going to look at is the continuation of the conflicts between the French and the British and the United States during Jefferson's administration, and specifically with the implementation of the Embargo Act. So, as one historian put it, the War of 1812 is called Mr. Madison's War, but really it was Mr. Jefferson's War due to the Embargo Act. I'm not sure I wholly agree with that statement, but there's some truth in there. So that's what we got going on this week. Obviously, you have your discussion boards, but one thing I do want you to be looking forward to is the first assignment that you have coming up, the first voice narrated visual presentation, and you can get the directions for that online under assignments. So read through those. If you have questions on that, please contact me. I'll be putting some other content up, I'm sure, through either announcements or through the message system through Canvas. So be looking out for that. But that's what we got. So with that, I will leave you as I always do. So go in peace, be warm and filled. May the force be with you. Live long and prosper, and may the odds forever be in your favor. Have a blessed week, guys.